Hi, Beth Neville for Art and Life, and we really have life today. We're out in our garden, chipmunks are running about, and I hope that beautiful cardinal is going to continue to chirp up there. That'll be such a pleasant sound to hear. There it goes. I hope you can hear it. Chirp, 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 chirp. All right, we're going to explore something quite different today. We're out in the garden, but I promised my art students that we would talk about waterfalls and how to draw waterfalls. Obviously, there are no waterfalls around here. The first waterfall I ever drew was with my father, an apple farmer, my mother, an apple farmer worker, and my little sister Louise and I went to Bash Bish Falls over in the Berkshires. It was very special that we could get away with my mom and dad. They worked so hard on the apple farm. And Bash Bish, it was in the spring. Bash Bish was just pouring over the rocks. And those of you who know that wonderful falls will know there's a very dramatic boulder, and the water cascades down into a very deep pool of very, very cold water. It was a favorite place for us to go swimming on dates too. So I have a lot of really great memories of Bash Bish Falls. My mom and dad each had a drawing pad, and all of us drew the waterfalls. I'm going to see if I don't have some images of that we can show you. I've given those 4 drawings away to my sister, but my dad only did 2 drawings in his life. One was of a chicken, beautiful, incredible drawing, and the other just a magnificent pencil drawing of Bash Bish Falls. It looked very Asian. He had an incredible eye for drawing. So that's my childhood memory of my first attempt to draw a waterfall. I've done some paintings. I did an acrylic painting, 4 feet by 6 feet of a waterfall. That is a combination of several waterfalls pulled together to make a very dramatic painting. It's one of my most popular paintings. People really love it. And if anybody wants to buy it, it is for sale. So today I'm going to turn to calendar art. Calendar art can sometimes be very useful. What irritates me now about calendars is that they no longer give credit to the artists who did the photography. They don't tell you where the waterfall is. Most annoying. So here we have 12 images of waterfalls and not a single attribution. Don't know where any of them are. But that's what's happened with calendar art since people are very few of the people are using calendars anymore. Printed in China, cheap reproduction. So we're going to look at these individually, and I'm going to try to show you what's most relevant about how the water cascades down, and what are the characteristics of a waterfall that make it so dramatic. And if you did want to paint or draw one, what would you be looking for? What are the most important features of the way the water cascades over the rocks? So we're going to thank my husband, Bob Neville, for being the videographer, and Tom Pilla, our wonderful, very great teacher at the Milton Access TV. If you want to learn how to do filming, he's the man. He's such a patient, excellent teacher. So we're going to readjust the camera, and we're going to be looking at the calendar and at my drawing pad. And thanks for watching. The first calendar photograph here is a fairly, it almost is a little bit like Bash Bish over in the Berkshires. One of the reasons I'm saying that is it's a woodland stream. It looks very much like New England. Here's birches, and the rocks are very weathered, very rounded, characteristic of an old glacier site, a very ancient one. Things are worn down. This was obviously a glacier valley at one point, very much ground down, and then yet there's a cascade coming down. It looks a lot like the Catskills or the Berkshires. It really is remarkably familiar, the type of vegetation and so on. And look at the moss over here on the rocks. So one of the characteristics we're going to look at first for this type of a waterfall is that this is a waterfall that's probably only exists with a full flow in the early spring when the snows are melted. And the reason I'm saying that is there's no indentation here in the rock. And the glacier has not melted off very fast very long ago in these areas. It's interesting to read a geology study of the glacier area in the Hudson Valley and the waterfalls that exist. There's some excellent books that describe it. So we imagine this under ice a couple of, thousands of years ago, but not ancient. Ice has melted off, creating the very deep gorge of the Hudson River, and the rocks are not indented. If this were an old waterfall, there would be a real indentation here where the water has worn down the terrain. So if you were going to draw that, and I'm just going to use markers so they'll show up better, we'd see up here the green moss very much level with the water. So we'll just use that line to indicate the moss, the rocky moss that the water's pouring over. And I'm going to use blues to indicate the white water. And we notice that we're looking sideways at this falls, and some interesting things happen. The water that's coming towards us is going straight down. These lines are straight down. But when you look at the water being pushed out by the rapidity of its fall, it's a curve. So these lines curve out. That's because we're looking at these from the side, and we're looking at these lines head on. So again, in this falls, there's a classic curve in here, and these lines come down this way, fairly straight. But then there's this much more dramatic curving line coming down here. This line would not, that's an error. This line would go straight down. It does not curve back under. Now, what happens, what's going on here? This cascade is hitting another rock. There's a rock sticking out here. That is why when this water flow comes down, then this does a shoot out like that. And there must be another rock there because this one shoots out that way. So that's the general feeling of this particular cascade. In here, we actually see some green moss underneath this area showing up. So if you were painting this, the underlying color would be green. And here's this green moss coming over here, and then we see some moss over here. And there's some delightful little rivulets. This is always fun in these New England waterfalls. Little trickles that come down, where the water is not coming down very strongly, or there's not very much of it, and you get sort of a little trickle coming down. Now, what happens at the base? This is always interesting. This baseline is flat across, and I have not drawn it that way, but we'll have to bring these lines down, 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 here, and so on. Oh, look at that little red mite. And when the water hits here, there's almost always a white foam, and the foam largely depends on the force of the water and how much water is coming down. And there's often a little bit of a mist here. You cannot draw a mist with a magic marker. Forget that. Magic markers don't do mist. But if you were doing it with pastel or some other color, you would see the mist. And then on some of these areas, if you were painting it, you would shade in behind here to get the sense of the contrast between the whites and the color behind. So I think that's enough of that. Now, on this same photograph, let's look at this area right here. This is quite fascinating to me. The water now is going down the stream bed at a rather rapid pace. So now the photographer for these waterfalls deliberately did not do a fast shutter speed. He did a slow shutter speed. And that's why all the water is kind of blurry. And as we look through this calendar, we're going to see that's the style that this photographer used, was to have it blurry. He could have made it so fast, the shutter speed so fast, that it would have been stop action, and you would see rivulets and you would see more detail in the water. And in a way, I sort of wish that he'd done that, or she, whether, and no attribution, unbelievable. All these photographs completely with absolutely no attribution. It's really, the state of photography now is so sad, so hard for the photographers to get any recognition or traction these days. So it goes flat, it's sort of bumpy at the back, bumpy, and then it goes down, bumpy, 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 down. The rivulets down, down, down. And in order to get that sense of the speed, you have to use fast strokes, very steady, nothing wavery. You know, this is a water flowing at a different rate. So here's another good example down here. We see the water going over the rock, fast, 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 fast here, and then another one coming in here. Very interesting to get this type of movement. Now, we will notice that the rocks, let's see if we can show you. The rocks on the distant shore, let's take this, show behind the water, all right? Let's just say that's a rock, and there's a rock. They show up behind. The rocks that are in front interrupt the view. Let's take this big rock here, and there's another rock coming in here. All right, this is mossy covered rock. All right, mossy, mossy, mossy. Okay, now, here, the water shows behind the rock. So if you're painting the water, you have to show it as if it were coming up to the rock and then disappearing behind the rock. So remember, things that are in front, the rocks that are in front, are going to show up big solid shapes with a sharp outline, all right, this way, sharp outline. And over here, the water has the sharp outline and the rocks are behind. And there's all kinds of variations in here. Here's a little rock in here sticking up, and there's other rocks and so on and so forth. Now, one of the reasons that the water is cascading here is because it's beginning to tumble down, and the photographer is looking at it. When he looks, or she looks further up the stream, the water appears flat. Look at how flat that line looks. The water's calmer there and is going in forming a pool back there before it rushes forward and tumbles down the slope. All right, let's look at another one of these and see if we can find one that has my 3/50th teacup is behind, holding this up. We're going to flip through, and I thought there was one that's quite interesting. Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's so different. I have no idea where this is. It's not Australia, I believe, but it looks more like Jim Jim Falls in Australia. So we're going to turn the page here. And I'm not a good enough geologist to know, to identify where this is. But there are a couple of things that we can identify. I'm thinking, as an amateur follower of geology, that this is ancient seabed limestone sediment set out in an ocean, and then very ancient, and I'm saying very ancient because it's tipped. Geological pressures underneath have tipped that seabed strata up this way, And then some of it has eroded away. This is quite fascinating. This would be a hard layer, more calcified rock here, and then a softer layer has eroded out. So that gives you this wonderful kind of layer cake. Almost looks like a cake layer of, of cookies and so on. Now up here, the water source is quite vague in this photo. We don't know where this is tumbling from, but I'm assuming this is an older falls because this crack, this crevice, has rounded out a lot. So I'm assuming that this water has cascaded over this area for quite a number of, 1,000 or more years, I would guess, because look at that curve. That would be sharp. And there must have been some crevice that would separate this upper part from this upper part, although this limestone strata and this one are continuous. We can see there's a continuous area here, and some rather dramatic change here. There's more red. Red probably symbolizes iron, I would imagine, some mineral. Lots of green from the moss. Okay, so if you're taking on this one, this is more about the rock than it is about the water. So I would start, if I were drawing this one, I would begin up here with a great big dramatic rock. So I would start up here with and get that rock. And that, to me, this waterfall is all about that rock going back there and so on. So very dramatic rock. And this would be black in here, and that would be black over there. And now the water, this also very dramatic. You see that line coming straight down, a little jig here, then another layer coming in here and down, then a big gap here, more of these very dramatic. This would be a fun one to paint. And then over here, this one is matched here on this side by the declivity here and back, so on. And then this takes a zigzag off over there, and then this climbing, these climbing strata here and over here, all this very dramatic stuff going on over here, lots of blacks and so on, and greens and so on. Now, the aqua pool, I've run out of space, all right, but there's the white foam, all right, and then there's the aqua pool down here at the base, and it's flat, more or less. All right, so how are we going to get the water to show up? I think what I would do for this one is I would take my green and all right, again, magic markers don't do water, but this is the best we can do. So the water's cascading down here, all right, very dramatically, straight down, this way, long, hits the rock here. See that? Rock in front, then it billows out here, and then down this way. And I would come in, with a lot of greens here, a lot of green, moss up here, moss up here, moss, and then get these dark blacks in, the black, this underneath part kind of coming along. Lots of dark up here, dark around there. So that would be and these lines going back here. There are these wonderful lines taking you back in here. And there's a very dramatic one over here. So that would be the general outline of where I would go if I were going to do a painting. And if I were going to do this in a painting, it would definitely be an oil or an acrylic. I wouldn't do this in watercolor. It'd be disaster in watercolor. Why would anybody bother? would make a terrible watercolor. All right, so that's enough of that one. Let's try, see if we can find another one. This is an interesting one. Okay, this is another, you know, forest woodland. To me, this one looks much more like Oregon, the waterfalls up in Oregon. I don't know why I'm saying that, just a first impulse. It just, what do you think, Robert? Do you think that looks like New England or is that Oregon? Bob has been to both of those places with me.
Yeah, I think that could be Oregon.
Yes,
Yeah. Yes.
Now why, oh look, somebody did one of those little, whatever those things are. And there's another one over there. Oh, that's funny. Why would you say Oregon? Why would you say?
It's, the waterfall is higher, it's greener, and I think I think it looks like the places in Oregon that we visited.
Yeah. And you know, to me, the size of those trees, this doesn't look like a New England tree. That looks like one of those giant, you know, vegetation forests out there. They have almost like a rainforest up there. It's really, it's so different. And I don't know, there's just, of course we could be completely wrong, who knows. But these are really funny. Those little rock piles. And doesn't that also looks like a redwood log. The size of that log, how flat it is, and big, that and being tossed down that waterfall. And also the rock strata are flatter, which would also be typical of that area, I think, rather than being heaved up or down. And so it also looks more like, you know, granite. Again, I'm not a, you know, I'm just not a geologist, so if I'm totally wrong, so be it. All right, so what are we going to do with this one? Again, another reason for thinking this might be a western waterfall is because this cascade has not worn down the level of the rock. So the level of the rock up here is pretty flat, and then so is the water. And then comes the water coming down. It has not worn down the rocks very much. So this cascade, if you were going to draw it, you probably would start by filling in the blacks areas and reserving the white. I think that's where I would begin with this one. And then, so there's that level. And then there's another level here. And we see the cascade coming down. This comes here. All right, and then we see, you know, another rock level here, more white up above, things coming. This one's interesting. This one tips up this way, so we see, sorry about that squeal, people. Somebody's backing up. We do live on Elliott Street, so you just have to, a cardinal is gone and the squealing truck is upon us. Coming back to this drawing, I think that we can get some more information out of this. A couple of things here. One of the things that's most interesting about this particular waterfall is that the water cascades this way. And this is a wonderful image over here. Here we have the mossy covered rock, and the water is kind of curling around that rock. So the rock makes a dramatic swoop up here. This is green moss here. I'm working with this section here. So there's that image. And then, but the water, let's just say the water's blue. It's not, it's white, but just for the sake of trying to get across what's happening, it does this. It sort of naturally flows over the curve of the rock, and then some of it goes straight down, others spurts out, then it does a little dip here, creates a wonderful little pool, and then it cascades down here. So it's clear that the water occasionally not only falls straight down or shoots out, but it also follows the contours of the rock. So here's another example here. Let's just take that little section there. It kind of comes here, and then it flows this way. Well, why does it do that? It does that because it's flowing over the rock. So it bubbles up and then tumbles down and follows the form of the rock. And again, at the base, where the pool is, we can see how flat the pool is. That's another interesting thing about these woodland waterfalls, is that the pool that is deep, and when the water hits that, it flattens out. So now there's one more. We don't have much more time here, but I wanted to show you a very different one in here. Let me see if I can find it. It's a very, by the way, these photos are terribly color enhanced. That is just absolutely ridiculous. They just went in there and pressed the button for yellow and green. This is a very classic fall, much more like Niagara Falls, straight down. This is the one I wanted to look at very briefly. Here, dramatic, a very dramatic, very fast shoot down, tremendous force of water, just shooting down, and we don't see straight lines at all. This is obviously, I think, in the Rocky Mountains, and where the waterfalls are so much more dramatic in the Grand Canyon and so on, those areas. It's just force, it's just shooting it down, and you would have to draw that in a totally different way. All right, in the next segment, I'm back again. In the next segment, I'm going to try to show you how to actually paint a waterfall. All right, Beth Neville for Art and Life. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.